Welcome to Hospitality Talks. My name is Sam-Erik Ruttman, and here is my co-host, Abid Butt. So we are very delighted to welcome you for this week's episodes, and we are talking restaurants. And we have a great panel and US-based professionals, so I'm very pleased to see that we can get some great insight of how the restaurant scene is developing now during this very interesting period of time. So let me hand over to Abid to introduce our panel, and let's get discussion going.
Thank you very much, Sam. Welcome, everybody. Whatever platform you're joining us, whether it's Facebook, LinkedIn, or YouTube, great to have you back. Today, we've got restaurateurs on our panel. As we all know, the restaurant industry has evolved over the last decade with new trends coming in place. Not only that, with the COVID in the mix of things, restaurant industry is been badly impacted. So we will get to know today from our speakers how they're dealing with it, what different revenue streams might be there, and we look forward to finding out a lot more about the dining trends. So without any further ado, let me bring in Anthony Scotto, who is the owner of Fresco by Scotto. Anthony, welcome to Hospitality Talks.
Thank you very much.
Anthony, thanks for joining us. You have been an owner-operator for the last 27 some odd years. Help us understand how has the business evolved over this time period?
Well, prior to COVID, the restaurant business was tight. I'm in the fine dining part of hospitality. I'm in Midtown Manhattan, east side of Midtown Manhattan. My customer base is politicians, sports figures, and tourists, and I do a lot of television work on the NBC Today show. That acquires a business that I have that has been flourishing for 27 years.
Oh, fantastic. In relative to, I have always said New York eats restaurant for lunch. There are more concepts that come up in New York. Some of the best restaurants are in New York. New York is the entertainment capital of the world. What are some of the new things that have come on the scene in the last 3, 4, 5 years?
Well, in my neighborhood, it's changed a lot. A lot of the fine dining has gone away, and it's really gone to a fast casual, fast dine, app-based type food distribution.
Okay. Now, you also, Anthony, have a catering arm of your business. Tell a little bit about how that works and how that supports your restaurant positioning.
Right. So I thought years ago doing straight fine dining would not diversify me enough to stay in this business, especially as long as we've been in one location. So I have actively taken on contracts for the New York Yankees. I just finished up with the Brooklyn Nets because of a sale. I also handle all of the Live Nation concerts in the tri-state area.
And from a revenue contribution point of view, do you prefer one revenue stream over the other? Is it about the same? And how have these different business segments been impacted with COVID?
Right. So the first question is, I always thought that everything would come back to Fresco by Scotto restaurant, if you can understand that. So if I'm dealing with the New York Yankees, or if I'm dealing with the Brooklyn Nets, or if I'm dealing with the Live Nation concerts, I'd always be talking about Fresco by Scotto to bring new business back to the restaurant. Now that COVID has hit, and on top of the riots that happened in New York City, we are set back till the fall, I believe, at this point.
Help us understand the demographics of your customer base? Then I'll turn it over to Sam here in a little bit. But after 27 years, I'm sure you have a lot of repeat business that comes there. Help us understand what is the demographics of your guests and how their needs and asks have been evolved over this time period.
Yeah. So again, prior to COVID, because there's no one in my area currently at their office, prior to COVID, my customer base was a lunch business. We were heavily respected by business, politicians, and again, sports celebrities that would frequent that restaurant 2 to 3, sometimes 4 times a week, with standing reservations, credit cards on file. Don't bother talking to me. Put 20% down. Thank you very much. See you tomorrow. We then built a business because we're not living in an area that is residential, that after a certain amount of years, probably 2 years, we built a dinner business that is equal to my lunch business now, of a different clientele.
And in restaurants that are in CBD areas or reliant on foot traffic from office space, that whole world is evolving because offices might not be at capacity for a long time.
I agree with that.
Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree with that. So 2 buildings that are located on my block is BlackRock. BlackRock is not talking about coming back until after the holidays. Yankees aren't talking about coming back at all this year. Brooklyn Nets, I don't have to worry about. They've sold for me. Live Nation concerts saying they're not coming back until 2021. I don't know.
So a lot of challenges, a lot of challenges facing us.
What's been happening is that the NBC Today Show, which I do a lot of segments with, and I would say a couple of hundred, have really been rerunning my cooking segments now, and it's been keeping me face forward with my customer base because I just don't want to lose that goodwill that I have. I think in the restaurant business now, I come with credits. Although every restaurant is going to open up new, I have credits because I'm there 27 years.
And that's very true. And people will go back to the businesses and restaurants that they feel most comfortable with. So obviously you've built a loyal clientele.
Yes,
Sam,
sir.
over to you.
Thank you, Abid. I'm fascinated by a family business story always, how a family has run a business or have run a restaurant in a very competitive market like New York. And so it is just something I just give my respect for that, about your success. What I'm interested to know now, what has been any changes in the customer taste over the years, or what they are looking for in terms of either menu changes or just the changes in how the meals are put together. So what have you been asked to do differently than maybe that was done before?
Yeah, thank you, Sam. So most fine dining restaurants were not fluid in the social media aspect of business. They wanted to keep their business as fine dining, and they thought fine dining was not going to be social media positive. That's changed dramatically. I believe, at least for Fresco by Scotto, the social media is attracting a new customer base for us, which are the young professionals that, especially in my area, to keep them understanding that we're open and we are wanting to take care of them. So we have built a social media platform in the past 2 years that has been really moving us forward.
Oh, that's terrific. Because one of the things I'm interested in, traditionally restaurants and hotels, for that matter, that particularly restaurants have evolved on social media much better than many hotels. All you have to do is go to Instagram, because what many of the customers are taking the pictures. I mean, maybe some of the chefs hate to see that people they are taking once a plate comes in front of them, start take picture rather than starting to enjoy the meal. But in what way are you involved in, or is your restaurant being seen in social media? Are you driving some by posting, or is it more of that your customers are sharing that their moments in your restaurant?
Well, on certain platforms, on Instagram and Facebook, I am doing those postings. But on Yelp, which is not fine dining friendly because it's only concerned about a price.
Yeah.
And other platforms, the customers are doing it themselves.
Yeah. Okay, I understand. Yeah, I have seen a lot of chefs are coming out now, and particularly during this time period, during the COVID-19 period, they've been doing Instagram TV and cooking, doing cooking shows, or just every Saturday or Sunday they are preparing a meal and sharing how they are doing this. Is something that you're involved with? I mean, your restaurant or your chefs doing that?
At Anthony Scotto Jr., you could follow me, and I'm usually on a daily basis. In fact, Alex critiques me on a daily basis to do recipes and fun ideas, basically ideas that are coming from a cupboard inside an apartment in New York City.
Fantastic, I like that. Okay, I'll remember that. You have a new follower from me.
Thank you, sir.
Great. Yeah. Okay. I think that's what was my main question. I'm interested. I have 1,000 more, but over to you, Abid.
Anthony, if I remember correctly, you denied the government subsidized support during COVID. Tell us what the thought process was. How did that help businesses? How is that hurting businesses?
Right. So I need to clarify that. I was too proficient in acquiring the PPP money. I actually received the PPP money the latter part of March. And in the beginning of April, my bank asked me to start using the money and dictate where that money was going to, because they really wanted to make sure that money through the SBA was going to be used in 2.5 months. Since then, things have changed with the PPP money. And it's made it a little bit easier, although really not geared to the restaurant business, more geared to a financial institution, a business office that's just paying straight rent and straight payroll. There's so many other variables that have to go along with the restaurant business, i.e. owing back purveyors just to get opened at this point, could be a couple of $100,000. So I didn't want to start acquiring loans for everything that I was going to do. Bank pressure was telling me to use it or give it up. I wound up giving it up in the middle of April. And of course, this now has all the turn to making things a lot easier to manage that money. Still not geared to the restaurants, but still easier to manage that money.
A lot of the restaurateurs have used this, for lack of any better words, offers where people buy a gift card for the future and pay for it now. What are your thoughts about it? Have you implemented it? And what kind of take-up rate do you think exists?
My customer base is a customer base that's very loyal. And the last thing I wanted to do, because we're at best 50-50 on how we're going to open and if we're going to open, that I didn't want to take money from those individuals and not being able to pay them back. We closed in such a hurry and paid a 2-week severance pay to our employees that we're basically zero on our bank accounts at this point.
Tough times, yeah, but I'm sure we will see the other side of it, and hopefully we'll come out stronger. Might it be?
I think so. With a change in attitude of first off, the cost of what is going to do to prepare a meal, how that meal is going to be prepared, the landlord participation, and moving forward, the cost of what you're charging a customer per head is all going to come way down. Much more simpler, and if you can gear towards that, I think there's a future.
Well, as long as if the price points are going to come down and average checks are going to come down, hopefully our expenses will come down proportionately or more so, because restaurants, as we all know, at times are a very thin margin business. So we got to make sure that the costs are kept in check, but there has been definitely a downward pressure on average checks unless you are in that very upmarket thing, but then volume might not be there. So it's a bit of a balance.
And Abbott, I've been talking to a bunch of people that are in the upmarket. I'm not. I'm in a two-star restaurant, but I would tell you that there are a lot of restaurateurs that I've been speaking to that are in the upmarket that are very, very afraid of their price point and need to figure out how to come down. Secondly, the aspect of worrying about to-go business in that market is disastrous because it never looks right, it never tastes right, and then by the time it gets home, it's destroyed. So, there are a lot of variables that restaurateurs are thinking about. So in my future, as I think of how I need to do this, it's nice to have a family business. It's nice to have family inclusion. I have a mother at a front desk. I have a sister that helps me run the to-go business. But I would tell you, if we don't acquire new partners to lead us to a new destination, I don't think we're there. I think we need to build a platform of new ideas with new generations, with new formats, and move forward. Growth is the only way to do this.
You're absolutely correct. At least from what I gather, the average lifespan of a restaurant is 7 years or so, particularly in a market like New York City. Now, yes. You have clearly beaten those odds, and you've been in the business for a very long time. From customer acquisition point of view, Anthony, how has that evolved? How are you bringing in the new guests? As I used to joke around with one of my friends, his restaurant was very classical. He's since then changed it completely, but I used to joke around with him that I was the youngest guy in that restaurant, and I'm no young. So right. How has that evolved?
Right. So I'm going to be honest with you. My average check price at Fresco by Scotto restaurant, not the to-go business, a separate store. Fresco by Scotto restaurant ran $65 average check for lunch and $80 to $82 for dinner. That respect of, what I did is I formulated a customer who I always remembered, knew what they wanted when they wanted to sit down, how they wanted to be treated as they were at the restaurant. Hopefully they would bring their children, have their children grow up in my restaurant 27 years, have those children appreciate that dining experience, and then keep moving forward. I've now added Instagram and depend on NBC Tourism and all of the other things that help bring a younger clientele to my business. But my customer base is definitely in their late 50s.
And I think there is a stigma, at least in the hotel side of things. If you look at the Grand Dams of Greenbrier or Homestead, where people went with their parents on vacations, it's almost that they don't want to go back there themselves. They might go once with their family as nostalgia, but there is definitely difference between what the younger clientele is looking for versus what the boomers are looking for, if you would.
Right. So, in instruction with my mother, who is, a wonderful person, but in her 80s and doesn't understand what the customer atmosphere should look like when it's at the restaurant, and to mix in both young and old at the tables is a different good move. That was not her business plan in the beginning. Children were always set in the back, but that is not the format of how we do things these days. I think that's the way to move forward.
Oh, Anthony, I'm always sat in the back, so it's I guess it's
come
okay.
Visit Fresco.
Well, that is terrific, Anthony. Please stick around. We have lots of other questions. We will definitely get back to you. At this point, I would like to bring in our next guest, Alex Gaudelet, who is the principal of hospitality firm. Alex, welcome to Hospitality Talks.
Thank you, Abid. Great to be here.
Alex, you have spent a lot of time in New York. You had built up a massive portfolio of restaurants. and you're at it again. Tell us how the dining scene has evolved.
Well, the dining scene in New York has evolved in a really interesting way. I mean, really focusing on fine dining is you have the chef-driven restaurants, and then you have the branded fine dining restaurants. And this is what really we've seen over the last decade. And even the chef-driven restaurants, I've gone into a little bit more of a simple approach to food versus the highly technical Pruises and for example, Thomas Keller opening his next restaurant being the Tack Room, which is really an upscale steakhouse. Very expensive because they use great products, but that's an example. The other trend is, restaurant brands like Milo's or Nobu, Zuma, those types of fine dining experiences that are not chefs driven, but very high quality and focused on, again, the best ingredient possible and simply prepared. I think in a lot of cases, the consumer on the high end level has been looking for, cleaner, better prepared, simply prepared food.
So the food that has been played around with, and for lack of any better words, are you saying that people would much rather have simple presentations? What shows up on the plate?
Well, I just think that luxury, the sense of luxury has really changed for the dining industry. Luxury used to be seating for 4 hours, having a very complex meal, and you have a lot of successful restaurants around the world. If you look at the top 50 restaurant list, etc., you have a tremendous amount of restaurants. And I grew up in that environment, working in 3 Michelin star restaurants. So I grew up in this environment, and even myself as a consumer, I don't really, I do these experiences maybe once a year. But I'll probably go to Milo's 3 or 4 times a year, and some of the other brands that I've mentioned, several times a year too. Just the consumer, so you can only take 4-hour experiences for so long, but the ones who are doing the 4-hour experiences, are busier than ever. If you look at it, because there is also a younger generation of consumers who have been, essentially bred watching the Food Network, and so there's a lot of interest. So that's what's actually interesting is if you go to high-end fine dining restaurants at 4 hours, you'll actually see a lot of younger people. They save up for several, years so that they can afford to go to 11 Madison or, Per Se and some of these other restaurants.
The pace of life, I believe, is demanding in a different way, so that spending 4 hours in a restaurant can be a tall ask because people are constantly on a go. Quite candidly, I think most of the population lives or dies by the Instagrammable moments, and it's micro movies and TikToks, and it's very short spurts of how things are done. How is it that there is still that segment that is going to a 4-hour dining experience, and how does that market look like, and how is it different from the average population?
I think it's a form of entertainment. It's a similar commitment to watching a 2.5-hour, 3-hour movie in the movie theater, where that's all you do. You're still going to enjoy it. So it has its place for a certain time, possibly a celebration or a special trip. You see a lot of people going to locations, and while they're in the city for a week, they might eat at the top restaurant in that city, and that's part of their agenda. And it does relate to the experience factor that you're discussing, is enjoying sharing the experience with their friends. Whether it's on Instagram, TikTok soon. I actually told my daughter this summer that she has to be an intern so she can teach me how to use TikTok. So you're putting this out, but I think great, interesting platform to look at.
It has gotten so popular, quite candidly, it's incredible. But some of these are fads at the same time. You just got to ride the wave as you can and connect with your consumer where they reside to be able to communicate with them.
When they're able to hire the number 2 of Disney as their CEO, not sure it's going to be a fad.
That is true. That is very true. Now, Alex, you have in the past, and you continue to place your restaurants attached to hotels. You also have independent freestanding restaurants. Help us understand, is one better than the other? Is one easier to operate than the other? Or do they gravitate to freestanding versus hotel? Any preferences?
Well, each situation is really unique. But let's talk about the hotel restaurants first. What's really challenging about hotel restaurants is the how many hours you have to be open. From breakfast, lunch, dinner. If you have room service that runs 24 hours, these are very challenging operational processes that you have to put in place to not only perform 24 hours a day, but also have unit economics that really generate a profit. So on the other hand, when you do have a hotel, it also is on the other side of it. If you're an efficient operator and you're in an area where you can not only capture hotel guests, but also outside traffic or walk-by traffic, the hotel can be a terrific place. So before choosing a location, we really try and figure out, is there a way to build a clientele above and beyond the hotel? Because unless you're inside the major casino, like I used to run MGM Grand's Food and Beverage, where we had 6,000 rooms, so you can count on the natural traffic from the hotel to really have a significant business. Most hotels, if you're capturing, on the higher side of it for dinner, if you're capturing 7 or 10% of the customers from the hotel, that's a pretty high level. So you really need to, to go above and beyond to attract people from outside.
Again, a stigma that has evolved over a period of time. Quite candidly, my younger days when I went to culinary school and was working in the restaurants, hotel restaurants were the places to go. They produced good quality food. People were attracted to them. Then the pendulum swung, in hotel restaurants were expensive, boring foods, and people that were visiting the city, they wanted to go out and experience the other restaurant. Now, the pendulum has sort of balanced it a little bit. A lot of fabulous concepts exist in the hotels. What have you heard from your consumer base?
Well, to go back to what you just said, I think that the hotel restaurant became boring as the hotel management company grew. And they try to really do a copy and paste version. When you start putting standards as to how a burger has to be in the entire world, if you're in this hotel, how can you really, deliver a product that the locals are going to want? In some cases, they don't even want to eat burger at all, right? So then, the hotel brands, looked around and started understanding, like, oh my gosh, we can't make money, it's not exciting. And, they started really thinking a little bit more locally about the restaurants. And I think that's still the biggest dilemma for hotels, is to figure out their food and beverage. Another issue with hotel chains, and I don't want to say anything bad about the hotel chains. I mean, look, they've taken our industry to a whole new level over the last 20, 30 years. It's pretty amazing, and it's allowed a lot of people to travel around the world, et cetera. But on the other side of it, there's very little tenure in food and beverage with executives. If you walk into any hotel around the world and ask for the food and beverage director and ask that person how long they've been in place, it's very likely that they've been in the hotel for less than 3 years, and very often less than 18 months. And as a true, as an operator, you start asking yourself, well, do they even know where the salt and pepper is kept, right? Anthony Scotto, 27 years in your restaurant, knows everything about that restaurant. And I think because he's built it, he's created a culture, he knows every person, he knows the dishwasher, he's able to build a team. When you're here, when you jump in after 5 years of running an operation or 10 years of running an operation, and you're only going to be here for 18 months to 3 years, how much of an impact can you really have on the restaurant that you're managing? And that's what's really been difficult for hotels to cope with, is this ever-changing, management team.
And that's a very good point. At the end of the day, a lot of businesses thrive on the leadership that they have, and that leadership is able to develop relationships with the local community. Hotels typically position their restaurants for hotel guests, which in retrospect might have been myopic. It's got to be positioned to not only attract the hotel guests, but also local community, and that's where the restaurant can thrive. I'll turn it over to Sam in a little bit, but Alex, how has COVID impacted restaurant business, particularly in a market like New York?
Well, first of all, they're still shut down right now. So, trying to guess what will happen, we can try. I think that some of the things that will happen immediately when we reopen the restaurants is that people will gear towards outdoor seating, because that's what we've seen across the country. People prefer to eat outdoors. They're not worried about somebody infecting them in a closed space. So being outdoor makes sense. But what happens in the winter? What will happen starting in November, where seating outside is not going to work. So I think COVID-19 has done a lot of things for New York. Prior to COVID-19, and I've said this to a lot of operators, New York City was the very best place on earth to own restaurants, because it had the largest concentration of guests with disposable income. It has one of the most exciting tourist scenes with a lot of attractions and people coming from all over the world to experience New York. The city that never sleeps is not a myth. You literally, from 6 o'clock in the morning until 12 o'clock at night, there's always somebody looking to have a meal. So it's very unique to New York City. Not a lot of cities have that. So if you have a successful restaurant in New York and you're competitive and you're a good operator, one chair, you might be able to sit it with 10 different customers on that same day. And there's nowhere in the world where you can actually say that's possible, at such a large scale. You used to have 10 million people looking for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Post-COVID, the biggest concerns that I have as an operator are, what is the office occupancy going to look like? We're seeing elevators that are supposed to carry 20 people upstairs are only going to be able to carry 4 people, right, with dots, underneath. So, how many people are going to continue to work from home until there is a vaccine? And what happens once the vaccine is there? Will we be able to really refill? The other big issue for New York City restaurants, they thrive on the bar scene, which is highly profitable, and the banquet scene, which is highly profitable, right? New York has probably one of the highest ticket for social and business entertainment. When you're doing a small banquet, a special event of 30 to 300 people, New York was able to command $125 to $200 a person. Well, that business, until COVID-19 is no longer a thing, is just gone. And that was, you take out the bar and you take out private events out of a restaurant, and you basically, cut the life out of it. So COVID-19 is an extremely difficult situation. And, it really is about 2 things: liquidity, how long can you sustain and how can you adjust your cost structure until such time as business may come back. So liquidity is going to be really important, and just become a very astute operator. But the math was so difficult. Most restaurants were running at a 5 to, if they're lucky and very successful, 15% profit margin.
Right.
If you're losing 40 to 50 to 60 to 70% of your revenue, there is no profit. It's going to be extremely difficult. So, it's going to be really interesting to watch, how operators are able to navigate the post-COVID-19, over the next 12 to 18 months. It's going to be extremely challenging.
Lots of challenges in front of us. Let me turn it over to Sam, please.
Thank you, Abed. Yes, I hear what you're saying. I was wondering, are there sort of a demand for takeaway or deliverable food if the restaurants in hotels, for instance, are not open? Is that something that is working in the area you are, in the hotels that you are having restaurants in?
Well, so I think that the delivery component is going to continue to grow, but it will only grow, to a certain extent for, the casual part of the business. Delivering of, as Anthony mentioned earlier, how do you deliver a $60 steak, in a to-go container? How is that really going to be sustainable? Are you really going to, if you're entertaining 4 people, 6 people in your house, or just, 2 people, with your spouse or significant other, are you really going to spend $300 ordering fine dining at home? And then it comes in and, how do you engineer the food so that when it's there, it is actually enjoyable? So I think more and more that's going to be really difficult.
Yeah.
Growing, delivery for fine dining is going to be tricky. Sure. Really, really tricky. Mm-hmm. So, some of the things that may happen is you may see, let's do a date night, and people have started doing this where they're doing videos on Zoom, and maybe I'll send you a meal kit and let's cook together. And that might be a higher end experience, and I might have a famous chef or notable restaurateur that might do that. That could be interesting, but that's not going to generate millions of dollars. This is just an opportunity to get the brand out there.
Yeah.
Now on the casual side, which we do have casual restaurants. I think that you have to be extremely shrewd when you operate a delivery operation, because the marketing of it through Grubhub, Seamless, and all these other platforms are extremely costly. It's very costly to market. It's very costly to deliver. They take a really big chunk of the revenue. So, it's pushing you to purchase better, manage your waste better, to be a lot more efficient with your labor, because in order to make, if you're selling pasta for $16 to $18 or, a $15 salad, to be able to make a 5 or 10% margin on this, when 15 to 25% of the top line is already gone to, pay, those platforms, it's very difficult. And these platforms, by the way, although they're taking a big chunk of you, they're not profitable. They're trying to consolidate right now. There's talks of Uber Eats buying Grubhub and, trying to acquire the market. But these have been actually funded, subsidized, really, if you can call it that way, by, venture capitalists. And, in this Uber, it's, basically raising money on the public markets. Mm-hmm. So that's really, there's a lot of hype about ghost kitchens. I think they're very challenging, from a state of, do you really want to have in your building a small, kitchen divided into 7 or 8, and, meanwhile, you're having a hard time selling your space on Main and Main, and then, you're that potential tenants, now you're giving them an opportunity to get in at a lower price. Yeah. So a lot of challenges ahead in the delivery business as well.
Good. Okay, excellent answer. Thank you. One of our viewers, and in fact, it's one of my favorite topics, is that and you mentioned about certain hotel brands have standardized that and really force a certain menu concept for their hotels. A typical example of all the places in one of the second largest city in Finland, they have one of the top 5 hotel companies operating a franchise, and there is an insistence to have a club sandwich and a hamburger exactly to the specifications that they're talking about. But the customer taste in Finland has changed. We are talking about clean eating and farm to table concept what people love to have. And I'm just curious, what is your take on sort of the kind of look on how people are changing their way, or are they looking for that comfort food that the club sandwich is exactly the way you can get it in anywhere international city, or is the farm to table and the more of a local experience from the farmers to the kitchens and served to the table a thing of the future, or perhaps already is here?
So it's a big question.
Yeah, I know.
So let me answer it in a few parts. So the first part, and I actually discussed this with Abid. One of our belief when we are about to take over an operation or we look at an opportunity is we don't do management contracts with large hotel operations, because I actually don't want to have to deal with I have to have the club sandwich and so on and so forth. I want to be able to focus on designing a menu that is specific to the consumer that we want to attract, right? So that's the first step is anytime we get involved into an operation, we need to have full control of the menu and the culture of the team. That's really critical. Now, on to what consumers, the second part of your question, what are the consumers really looking for? So there is a time where the consumer would like to have comfort food, and that's terrific, and we can provide it. But what is really important for consumers nowadays, it's something that I call dietary preferences. They're not restrictions, they're called preferences. It's my lifestyle. The way I eat, the way I work out, the way I, want to be healthy, right? Healthy is a big word that really means nothing when it comes to food, because everybody has its own health plan, right? Some people want to be carb-free, some people want to be vegan, some people want a high-fat diet, keto diet. I mean, it's all over the place. So trying to say that your food is healthy is a little bit, in my opinion, ignorant. I think what you have to do is you have to respect people's dietary preferences. So when they come to your restaurant, you have to have a menu that is interesting and that within seconds they can recognize where the lifestyle should take them, right? If they want a simple salad with a grilled protein or a vegetarian protein, then they know right away, because the menu not only is written in a way that's legible, but you might have a sign that shows that something is specifically gluten-free or something is specifically vegan, and so on and so forth. And that takes away a lot of the friction with the waiters, and that, because that's what's happening in places that don't draft their menus correctly. What happens is the waiter gets to the table, the consumer they already know what they want to eat, and then you end up with 10 modification on the check, and the waiter doesn't really know, and then they go to the chef, and what happens when the waiters go to the kitchen.
That's excellent. It just reminds me of the days I was a waiter.
Yeah. Well, especially I'm also when I was a waiter back in France. Trust me, you didn't want to go talk to the chef.
No.
It was never a good time, to talk to the chef.
Yeah. Very good. Okay. There's a concept that has been developing in the Nordics and Northern Europe called zero waste, where the kitchen and the restaurant promises that whatever they buy from the farm will be used to the point that there's a zero waste, and it's actually being used. It ends up on the customer table in some sort of a way that it's edible and it's actually delicious. Is that something that is happening in your part of the world, or is that even in a concept?
The pioneer in our region is Stone Barn, Dan Barber, he's doing a fantastic job. I mean, the candle is, made out of beef fat. I mean, this is like how far they take it. I think that, as you want to attract a younger generation to work with you and you're building a culture, there are very, and for the best, really for the best of humanity, the youngsters are being grown, and taught in schools to not waste and, think about the environment and so on and so forth, especially with social media. They'll believe Instagram before they believe their parents. So that's the good news. When the information is correct, it's the good news. But so I do think that this movement is only going to get greater. So yes, I mean, I think you see it all over, but it's more of a mindset than just an advertisement of, we're going to do it. It's really like, why should you waste this food? And especially there's such a disparity in our world. We're fortunate in the U.S. and we don't have the level of poverty than third world country. You still have such a disparate distribution of fresh food versus processed food that there's a real conscious of let's not waste that carrot. What can we do with that carrot? And so that's also one of the reasons the days of fine dining, where in order to make a proper lemon pie, you would have to buy 10 lemons and throw 80% of it away because you had to have. I mean, I worked with Joel Robuchon for many years. He was my partner. I created a lot of restaurants with him. But he was a little bit of the epitome of that. Let's take a beef fillet and only cut 40% of it for the consumer, and the rest, well, we'll figure out how to make burgers with it. Well, guess what? Filet is not really that great for burgers. But that's the thing. It's let's serve the vegetables in a natural state. We might peel them. We'll use the peel to make a broth. Those type of things. But absolutely, this is going to stay, and it's going to be stronger than ever.
Well, I'm very glad to hear that, because I'm really a great fan of this concept and this way of thinking, in fact. All right, so that's all I have for this time. So, Abid, over to you.
Thank you.
Alex, one last question, and I'll bring in our next speaker. When you were selecting a concept, what sort of attributes are important to you?
Well, longevity. Right, because ultimately you're running a business. So if you pick a business that may not live in the next 15 to 20 years, it's going to be really difficult to return capital. It's going to be really difficult to be relevant. So whatever concept we pick, really the most important is relevance and longevity. Will people still eat this way in 10 to 15 years? And will I be able to adjust a business model for that business?
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Alex. Please stick around. There are a bunch of other questions. We'll come right back to you. But at this particular point, I'm going to bring on Des Reilly, who is the managing principal of Star Restaurant Group. Des, welcome to Hospitality Talks.
Thank you, Ab. It's great to be here with you. And I just want to say, I really appreciate the perspective of Anthony and Alex coming from New York City. I'm originally from New York City, spent a lot of years there. I have found my career path in the greater Washington, D.C., Baltimore area, but hearing their perspective is very enlightening to me.
We've really enjoyed their comments, and our viewers are enjoying their comments. There are lots of comments being made on different platforms, so we'll get to that in a bit. Des, you are in a growth mode. You've developed some concepts, and you're trying to grow those concepts. Tell us a bit about that freestanding, independent positioning versus brand. Why do you prefer one over the other, and what are your consumers saying?
Well, that's right. Actually, we have sort of a pre-COVID approach and a current COVID approach. Before COVID-19 stay-at-home mandates were implemented by Muriel Bowser in DC, we were looking to take Star Restaurant Group from 3 locations to 6 locations. We have 2 Walrus Oyster and Ale House full-service restaurants, and we have 1 chicken and whiskey fast casual with a whiskey bar in the back concept, and we have a 3rd concept, which is a Vietnamese concept called Doi Moi, which is now closed for a renovation. What happened was when we had the stay-at-home mandate, we had to go back and take a hard look at not only the model itself, but how we are going to grow in a period of this tremendous uncertainty. So obviously we start with the location, we start with the lease, we start with the structure of the lease, we start with the relationship with the landlord, and we take a hard look at that, and we come up with a plan that makes sense. Our greatest concern, Abid, is not the next 2 to 3 months where we have PPP funds that will get us through. Our concern is, how do we operate successfully in the next 12 months? How do we navigate restaurant closures, partial openings, spatial distancing? How do we navigate patio service only? That has really been the big change. The strategy has forced us to become, quite honestly, much more creative, where you look at our models in a different way. For example, the chicken and whiskey model, which is a very, very successful fast casual restaurant, highly millennial driven. It's a Peruvian rotisserie chicken restaurant in the front with a speakeasy style whiskey bar in the back. Well, the bar is closed. You don't have guests that can enter the bar. So what do we do with that model? We took the bar and we stuck it in the front window, and suddenly we create a whole menu of curbside cocktails, to-go cocktails, expanded patio, and our sales have been dramatically improving week by week. It's been really quite remarkable. The same thing with our full-service Walrus restaurant concept. We have a gigantic, beautiful shucking bar. We shuck between our 2 restaurants, one in the National Harbor and one in Columbia, close to 700,000 oysters a year out of those 2 locations. We are a tremendous driver to the Oyster Recovery Partnership. We are proud to be partnered with them, and we recycle all 700,000 oysters back into the Chesapeake Bay on a yearly basis. So that's been really a great experience for us to be part of. But what we've done in that instance is we've taken a shucking bar that has been hidden in the back of the restaurant where you can't see it unless you come in. We put it in the front window. Again, we're really trying to creatively pivot as quickly as possible to show people from the outside what we're doing on the inside, because they can't come into the restaurant on the inside. So it's forcing us to make some pivotal changes, and I feel like this is only going to help us get stronger, only going to help us get better as we move forward. We have now mitigated growth plans. We are going to move ahead with our second chicken and whiskey, which is very close to Nat Stadium. It's in the ballpark district of Washington, D.C. So what Anthony was saying to me really resonated. I appreciated that. And we are under a full renovation for our Vietnamese restaurant called Doi Moi in Washington, D.C. So we're using this downtime to completely pivot a restaurant that's been open for 8 years and design this restaurant in a COVID-friendly atmosphere.
That quote unquote COVID-friendly atmosphere, help us understand that. How are the design elements changing in post-COVID environment?
Sure. So one of the first calls I made to our architect design team, design case, Michelle Beauvais, who's a wonderfully talented designer in Washington, D.C., I said, listen, this is what's coming down the pipe. We've got to be prepared. We want to open this restaurant in 11 weeks. How is this going to look with all of the demands that the jurisdiction of Washington, D.C. is placing on the space? How are the tables going to look? How is the bar going to look? What are we going to serve at the bar? It's really been a tack on design that not only includes spatial distancing, but simple things like moving the host stand outside, taking the bar that normally would have walk-up traffic and turning it into a grab-and-go location. Really taking a hard look at the layout of the tables, the layout of the chairs, the banquettes, all of that seating in tandem with the most important thing, the menu. My second call was to my culinary director, Ben Nichols, and Wade Fatt, who was our new executive chef at Doi Moi. how do you look at a world of COVID from a menu perspective? Because we create food and beverage. The product is the most important thing we do, not the design. The product drives everything. What Alex said truly resonated with me in the sense that people make lifestyle choices. They make lifestyle choices based on your menu. So you've got to really truly understand what you're putting out there. And if you don't have a compelling product, you don't have a compelling reason for someone to come into your restaurant, whether it be grab and go, whether it be ASAP, one of our third-party delivery companies, or whether it be a curbside pickup, well, you're not going to have any of that business. So that's really how we approach it.
Des, your demographics tend to be on the younger side, millennial driven. Are there distinctively different needs from that market segment versus the boomers might be, and how are their dining habits different?
That's been a really interesting sort of case study for us over the past 3 years. Chicken and Whiskey, which is 3 years old this June, is primarily a millennial driver, if almost exclusively a millennial driver. So what that has shown us is people are looking for, that group, that demographic, they're looking for good, fast, cheap, the holy triumvirate, and fun. That level of entertainment is essential in everything we do. That fun factor. If we can't deliver that, then we're missing on that full package. People want more than the food. They want the atmosphere. They want to feel the vibe. They want the music. They want the great drinks. But here's a key thing for us in that millennial market: super price sensitive. We have to offer value. We have to offer a product that's going to really ask them to come back twice a week. And if we can create that value, because the sensitivity to the price point there is essential. Our Chicken and Whiskey model has an in-store PPA per person average of roughly around $14. Our third-party delivery is much higher. Alex spoke to that point, but that piece has really resonated. That good, fast, cheap, fun factor has really resonated with our millennial audience. Now, in our Walrus Oyster and Ale House concept, we have a sizable chunk of millennials, but we also have boomers and Gen Xers. That demographic really is quite different. That's a more lunch-heavy crowd. We also see that audience during the week. On the weekends, however, we see a greater millennial foot traffic coming through that likes our big bar concept, our happy hour offerings, and our late night happy hour. That's really been a key piece for us. We're able to really segment not only the demographic, but segment the day. We call them day parts, as you know. And so we really put a lot of emphasis behind getting as many day parts out of our models as possible. And that means starting early and finishing late.
Des, talk about technology, particularly with your targeted demographics that are very tech dependent. How has that helped in acquiring other new customers through the doors? And what technology have you deployed to stay connected with your consumer base?
Sure. Well, the social media platforms for us are essential. We're very active, very aggressive on social media. But the key piece there is that we engage. We just can't put postings and product and messaging out. We have to somehow engage the audience. We have a wonderful social media director, Celia Camacho, who oversees all of that. She's an expert at helping what's happening in our heads get out to the general public, but in a compelling way so they want to respond back. One of the key pieces of our ASAP delivery platform is a technology piece called Ordermark. We have six different ASAP channels that we push food out through at our Chicken and Whiskey concept, and that's it's sort of been a very challenging double-edged sword, if you will, not to sound with such a cliche, but Alex touched on this. When we were pre-COVID-19, our ASAP third-party delivery sales were roughly 45%, anywhere between 38 and 44%, depending on the week, of our sales. However, during COVID, that's mushroomed to 73% of our sales. That means mathematically, I'm going to be out of business if I keep operating in that vein. It doesn't make any sense at all. But one of the key technology pieces is the OrderMark platform, which consolidates all of our 6 ASAP delivery channels onto one small screen, and we can pick and choose which we're going to accept at any given time, and we control the whole thing in that manner. So it's been really much more streamlined approach, and it helps us stay organized. It helps us know when peak times are coming, and it helps us be able to moderate the channels, because there are times when, our small little restaurant on 14th Street is 1,300 square feet in the front, another 1,200 square feet in the back, tiny. But we do $1,350 a square foot in sales in that space, which is really remarkable for such a small little business.
I think this is a great time for me to hand it over to Sam, because he loves technology and loves social media. So over to you, Sam.
Well, thank you. Well, I have to disappoint you, Abid. I'm not going to talk about tech or social media, but because you're developing concepts, and actually I'm very interested in concepts, and I'm not asking you about what is the lifespan of a concept, but what you see is now developing in your mind, between your ears and your head, what's going to be the next thing, big thing, because the thing that we're going through with COVID-19 and so on. What are your customers telling you, what they are looking for?
So that's been quite an interesting sort of discovery these last couple weeks. What we're finding is that our guests want things to move quickly. They want to be able to grab and go. They want to be able to get a high quality, whether it be food product or alcoholic beverage product or non-alcoholic beverage product. They want to be able to get that and either take it home to their families quickly or consume it as they're on the go, whether they're driving, whether they're walking down the street. They want to be able to be mobile. So we've taken our full service restaurant concept, the Walrus, and we are now building a smaller 1,000 square foot concept on adjacent to the restaurant called Walrus Roadside. So this is a concept that's got probably 20 items on it, 20 food items, but it's built to be mobile. So you walk up to the counter, you grab it, you go, whether it's our Maryland's Best lobster roll or one of our incredible crab cakes. It's meant to be mobile. So if you can't take it and walk away with it and eat it either at a picnic table or as you're walking to another store, then we don't want to serve it. We are finding that in light of COVID-19, which is really the world I have to operate in now, right? I can't operate under the presumption that this is all going to go away and everything is going to be back to normal as soon as possible, because that would be naive and that would be really short-sighted to think that. I certainly hope that. I certainly am planning for the day when that happens. However, this is my reality check. This is my now world, and this is the way we have to operate. So that sense of mobility, that sense of still getting the high quality product that is delicious and drives repeat guests, but it's got to be built to go, and it's got to look great. It's got to taste great. And fortunately for us, I don't have the challenges of the more high-end restaurants that Alex and Anthony operate. I like to produce food for the common man, the everyman and woman, and that makes it more easier to travel, if you will, easier to make the product look better, and the expectation isn't as high. However, we deliver big time on the quality.
Yeah. So everything you were saying, I was seeing in my eyes a food truck that is delivering that kind of quality. I mean, not putting down the quality, but in the sense that if there's a mobile demographics, and you should also be able to go where those people are to give them what they're looking for. So is food truck is part of a sort of a concept that would fit into what you're doing?
You know what? I'm not a food truck guy.
Okay.
I'm not a food truck fan. I am a bricks and mortar guy.
Okay.
I believe in being a staple in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
I believe in connecting to the community.
Yeah.
I love Anthony's story and his connection to the community. What he said really resonated with me. This is what we endeavor to do. We are not fly-by-night operators where we open up and we move to the next location. My two partners, Stu Damon and Chris Carr, we go in, we operate the restaurants, we general manage the restaurants, we work in them day to day until they're at a point where we have a comfort level, and this takes anywhere from 6 months to a year, by the way, where we can step outside, bring in a properly groomed general manager who buys into the culture, understands what we're doing. I have two small children. I look at these restaurants like my children. I have a lot of emotion, a lot of energy, and a lot of blood, sweat, and tears that we pour into these locations, and we do not hand them over to just anybody. We do not.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, thank you. I love that passion. Very good. Okay, that's over to you, Abid.
Des, what it's been like dealing with different stakeholders, particularly as you try to retool your business in post-COVID era. Now, you did opt in for government assistance, but you've been dealing with your landlords and you've dealt with your associates. And tell me what that has been like.
Sure. We have a wonderful investor group of over 50 men and women who've invested privately in our 4 concepts. These are people that the range is wide from their professions. Some are restaurateurs, some are medical and business people, some are real estate executives. But the bottom line is they believe in the product that we're putting out there, but more so they believe in my 2 partners, Chris Carr and Sue Damon, and the 3 of us to get the job done. Sure, they're looking for financial returns, but they're looking for long-term financial returns. And so their support has really been tremendous. I couldn't do it without them. Their support has really been unwavering, even in locations where we've had a rough go of it at the beginning. The truth is, all of our restaurants have been a rough go at the beginning. It's usually taken us a year to almost 2 years to really start to make money. But they've been unwavering in their support, which has been tremendous. A key piece in all of this is the landlord-tenant relationship. When COVID-19 struck, the first thing we did was we got on the horn and we called all of our landlords. We have a personal relationship with our landlords. We don't look at them as a creditor. We look at our relationship as really a sort of partnership, if you will. And I know that sounds sort of, I don't know, untrue.
Cliche.
It isn't really. It's really meant. We've been fortunate. We've got some wonderful partners who believe in what we're doing, and they, put their money where their mouth is. We have received rent abatements. We are striking deals where we're showing a ramp up in sales, and we want them to give us a ramp up in rents. And so when we mathematically show them what our businesses are doing over a period of time, they can quickly see the model and how the model works or doesn't work, and how the ASAP plays into all of this with the fees, the anywhere from 22 to 30% fees that the ASAP people take. Well, now they're being forced to really understand that model as well. So I will say that our negotiations are ongoing with our landlords, but we're all going in the positive direction. So I'm very, very pleased with that, because that will, in essence, really sort of seal our fate, if you will. If they're expecting full rent over the next 12 months, we will might as well hand them the keys back to our restaurants now. But that's not going to happen.
Well, hopefully you'll be able to work through that, because everybody understands the environment that we're operating in. And I believe, at least for now, everybody has been very forthright in having the conversation. What the end result turns out to be is going to depend a lot on the relationships and a lot on each entity's financial strength. But I hope you'll be able to work through that. One last question before we bring everybody back to the discussion. From your perspective, where do you think the recovery would be best? What types of restaurant would recover faster than the other?
I'm in the midst of it right now. It's really hard to be super logical about this because things are changing on a daily basis. But what we are seeing, when we opened our patio at Walrus, immediately we had a line out the door. People couldn't wait to get into the patio and sit. So that really showed me that we've been open for 2 years in that location, that brand now has historical sort of preferences for our guests that make them want to come back. I do believe that the chicken and whiskey model, the fast casual model, is and will continue to be very exciting and very, very fruitful for us. Abid, it's both, really. I can't really make judgments at this point. I can't really give you an honest call on what I think. I see both. They're so disparate, really, the 2 models that we operate. So I don't really see a clear path for either one. I see more potentially explosive growth with our chicken and whiskey model. However, people are always going to want to go out and socialize. They're always going to want to go out and see other human beings and enjoy the experience. That's not never going to go away. I mean, my wife and I, we've been homeschooling our kids for 75 days, and we can't wait to get out of the house and go out and see our friends. So, that's the world we live in. That's my take.
I think the social aspect is encoded in human beings' DNA, and that cannot be taken away. And we are very fortunate that we're in the industry that facilitate bringing people together. Though we are going to be a bit bruised and hurt coming out of COVID, but I think we will come out strong. Sam, if it's okay, let's bring everybody back together. And now, if you don't mind, I'm going to throw a question to Anthony. Anthony, we talked a little bit about the sustainability aspects of operating a restaurant. Tell us how imperative that is in your operation, and how much of it is the customer seeking that out?
I think it's very important. Again, we're talking about what's going to happen in the future now. I'm generating my money and business on a financial area with a rent that is extremely high in 2 locations next door to each other. So if I'm looking at what I have to do to make people happy, I need to make them happy by coming into the restaurant first. And then once I've had them there, to repeat the business that I've had in the past 27 years is to have them keep coming back. New York is a different animal than Des at this point, because we won't have a bar. We won't have a lot of these things that will encourage people to come in and socialize, at least for now. I'm telling you, New York is waiting for a vaccine, and I think without that vaccine, we have headaches.
Anthony, you can't be spraying vodka as in spritzers, and that takes care of this?
I think if I could attract 50 people a day on that, I will spray vodka and anything else I could spray at this point.
Alex, a question for you. The fine dining of white glove service, if I go back that far, has now been replaced with latex gloves. The cloches have been replaced with the staff wearing masks. How do you create an ambiance in that environment that is welcoming and that does not give you the feel of a sterile environment?
Yes. Here comes the easy question. Thank you, Evan. So, well, I think that you'll see people innovate, and where the plastic gloves might be of a certain color that might match their outfit. I mean, people are going to make do as much as they can. But I'm with Anthony on this. I think the rest of the world, this vaccine concept is, I think, a real one in terms of things will never go back to normal per se, but at least they'll go back to a certain level of ease. And I think until that ease is back, it's going to be really difficult to to have this white glove service. So very difficult to think of a waiter with a mask on taking your order, and how that Now, can you have a designer mask and you look good? Yes, you're going to do the best you can. But as soon as you can get rid of that mask, that's going to be, much more enjoyable for everybody.
Yeah. I think people will adapt, and yes, people will come up with creative masks if that's what's needed, or gloves that might be a little bit different. But that's not what we have been used to. We go in the restaurant space to socialize and relax and let our hair down. And unfortunately, right now, the operating environment is not that. So any thoughts as to how to do it creatively, how to do it differently that particularly appeals to millennials? And I'll throw this out to you, Desmond, since you deal with that crowd.
So that crowd, as we're seeing it, is a little easier, quite honestly, to deal with. They seem to be less cautious, for sure, less concerned about the gloves and the masks, and more concerned about, getting their life back on track the way it was. That's really what I'm seeing.
If I may, Abid, there's one thing that we're looking at doing in our casual restaurant is to, power technology so that, essentially you remove the waiter and they can order directly from their phones, so by downloading an application. And, while it doesn't, again, the younger generation is going to adopt that much faster. Some of them might actually prefer it because it's just more efficient. I don't have to wait for a server to come around. I can order when I'm ready, and I can order a second drink when I want, et cetera. So I think that you actually are going to have a particular dining, not the white glove dining, but a particular dining segment, specifically the, casual full service dining, that could actually benefit from this switch, because technology is much cheaper than a waiter, or, especially in places where there's no tip credit, or places like New York where the minimum wage is $10 an hour. If you can have a consumer that orders a $15 to $18 pizza on their phone, it's going to be much better to operate that way.
I also think that there is with the apps that are available, that you can make it actually high touch and without touching, is meaning, let's say, either it's a FaceTime or WhatsApp where you actually see the person who's taking your order, and then still make it sort of that the eyeballs are connecting.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Alex, since you have the camera, you've operated restaurants in hotels, you've operated restaurants in independent environment. Most of the restaurant, and I'm generalizing, and I know that that's not applicable, but a lot of the restaurants shy away from breakfast meal period. Is there one meal period more profitable than the other? Because every time you have a business meeting, there are only very few restaurants that have quote unquote power breakfast.
Well, breakfast could be profitable, again, if you can build that power breakfast with outside customers. We did this when I was working with, my partner, Steve Henson. He's my partner now, but Steve Henson built Be Our Guest restaurants. We were running breakfast at Bluefin on Times Square inside the W Hotel, and that was a very successful breakfast. We used to do 250 to 300 covers a day because we built it, and actually one of the success of that was that it wasn't a, $45 typical hotel breakfast where, you could get an omelet for $18 and, a cup of coffee, and people, business people will be happy to do this. The most profitable business, meal period is still dinner, because you naturally have a liquor component to it, that's brings up the average check, higher. Now, the good news about the meal periods is that, if you can operate multiple meal periods, and even if breakfast and lunch are not as profitable, they still contribute to the fixed cost, which, is tremendous in driving the bottom line. So as long as you can run these, successfully, even if you're only making 5% at breakfast, well, you know what? They've taken care of a good portion of their rent, the management salaries, anything that's really a fixed cost benefits from the more hours you're open.
Terrific. Sam, I'll come to you in a second. I'm not sure if there are any questions that we want to pose, but let me ask another question to Anthony. Anthony, what's the future for Fresco by Scotto? Are you planning on growing that? Or are you planning on innovating and changing that in some way?
Yes. So, we wanted, the original business model was to be in the restaurant business, have an annex of a to-go business. I got a little scared being just in that mantra, and then took on the Yankees, Brooklyn Nets, and Live Nation concerts to try to diversify. Obviously, that diversification pre-COVID has been a zero, but the only way at this point, and to be honest with you, I have been talking to Alex and Steve about this, is the only way of dealing with this business now is to grow. Des has got a great business plan. I think the way his model is just what it should be for the future. and it's developing more locations in different concepts of food, and then developing packaging food that could be done for stores.
And you think you might go down that path, developing ventures with other partners, and you might grow that way?
Please, Alex. Yes. Really, truly, that is the business plan for Fresco. You know, we have been blessed with so much television work, so much exterior goodwill outside of the food venues. The name of Fresco by Scotto is wonderful. I think it can grow, and I think we could be part of the future.
Gentlemen, there are a lot of large restaurant organizations that have grown through M&A. They've sort of gobbled up some of the smaller operators, and you operate in an entrepreneurial way. And Des, let me ask you this. Do you think that still the independent individual neighborhood restaurant stands a chance of making the business model work? And how do they compete with the larger organizations?
I absolutely believe that. And I believe that because the big landlord companies that want our smaller independent creative company to come in and join their ranks, it makes us more interesting. It makes us more attractive. Not everyone can survive on big box restaurant stores. Not everyone wants to go to these big box restaurant stores. They want to go to Fresco by Scotto. They want something that's real, something that's local, something that's creatively different in terms of the offering. So I truly believe that the independent entrepreneur who's a creative thinker and a concept designer will really flourish in this atmosphere.
Fabulous. Sam, anything that might have come through from our viewers that we need to talk about?
Well, nothing specific, so perhaps it's a time to do the feel-good story bit here and see if everyone has some sort of a story to share from what they learned from this time.
Terrific. We always end the show, and we ran over a bit, but we always end the show with sharing some feel-good story, something that you might have seen in the industry, something that you might have learned about yourself during this COVID day. So let me start with Alex, if you don't mind.
Well, the best part of COVID-19 is that I've had the pleasure to have dinner with my two daughters and my wife, and daughters are 14 and 9, for the last 2.5 months. And, you know, in the restaurant industry, we don't do that. We are, you know, we're always home after dinner. I usually, you know, when the business was running at regular times, leave the house at 6 a.m., come back at 9 p.m. kind of schedule, sometimes much later. But, you know, so it's been terrific, to be honest. I mean, you know, from a business perspective, it's extremely challenging. From a personal perspective, it's been, you know, one of the greatest time of my life. So
that is one of the consistent things we have heard. Whilst it's been tough on business, on the personal side of things, people feel far more connected with what has been forced upon us, whether it's digitally or with immediate family units, than they did as they were going on about their daily routine. Des, anything you would like to share? Anything that you have been involved in or you have seen in the industry from an uplifting story?
Sure. Thank you for the opportunity to actually express that. I love Alex's story. I had the pleasure of being able to teach my 6-year-old how to ride a 2-wheeler during COVID. So that was a big deal to me. So now we take bike rides together, which I got to tell you, you know, I haven't ridden a bike in years. And now I'm cruising around on my beach cruiser in my neighborhood with my 6-year-old next to me. It gives me a lot of pleasure. It really does. But one of the most amazing things that happened during this crisis is we started working with Howard County General Hospital in Columbia. They reached out to us and they said, would you be interested in coming on board and delivering at-cost meals? That means I'm going to sell them a crab cake, which normally I would charge you $22 for. I'm going to sell to them for $8, right? So I'm just going to cover my costs. But we started doing hundreds of these meals to Howard County General Hospital every week. And I would put all the food with my gang in my Jeep, and I'd drive it over there. We would delivered to these people, and they were so overjoyed. They were so happy, so gracious, and I never expected that type of response. I was just the delivery boy. That's really all I was. But suddenly, these people were just so happy that someone was really sort of on their behalf working to get these guys fed at with some delicious homemade food, and made me realize this is why I do what I do. I grew up in this big, loud Irish Catholic family. Everyone's eating and drinking and arguing and yelling and that type of thing. But we never left the kitchen. We had this big house, but no one ever left the confines of the kitchen. So that's really that sort of connection, that food connection, which drives the social connection, which drives the love. That's really what we do, and that drives me big time. And so that really sort of was a wonderful sort of, reckoning of why I do what I do for a living.
Well, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And last but certainly not least, Anthony, anything that you would like to share? Now, you work with your family, and business and the personal things could be together, but anything you would like to share?
Yeah, what's nice, a restaurateur has always wanted to have weeks consecutively off on a vacation and still not having to worry about the money or the product. We've all been forced into that now. And there's a feel-good part of it and a worry part of it. But Alex and Des, I miss the idea of a child learning how to ride a bicycle or going out for walks. My son is 23, working for BlackRock now. My daughter is a aspiring singer-songwriter in Nashville, and my life has changed in a whole different way. Worries become a little bit more and a little bit different, but look, I think there's still a future in our business. I think there's still a future of what we can do and how we can prove ourselves. And I'm up for the challenge and can't wait for the next chapter.
Terrific. I think that is a great note to end our session. Thank you, Anthony. Thank you, Alex. And thank you, Des, for joining us. Fabulous conversation. I'm sure our viewers would take a lot away as a result of this. Thanks for sharing your experiences. It's great to have you. Thanks to our viewers for joining us. We look forward to bring you many more of these conversations in the future. Over to you, Sam.
Yeah, thank you very much, everyone who has joined the panel today. And also thank you very much for all the live viewers and all the replay viewers, whether you are viewing us in YouTube or our Facebook page or in LinkedIn Live. So I hope you have enjoyed this episode, and we will continue this week with another episode about restaurants. So I hope you will join it this time.
Thank you.